Thank you very much, Iyalode, and greetings to all. Thanks to the IOCTT for the opportunity to speak. When the information was sent to me, I felt I am a bit of a recluse. I don't go out much except to the supermarket. I have to find food. And although I have spent many, many years in Esuseeke, as my introduction has said, and I purposely wrote it that way, there have been occasions where I have had to pause for cause. But this I could not refuse. There were two little things before, and having listened to not Dr. Gibbons, and after having listened to a lot of what the Alutuse has said, I'm feeling a little bit redundant here. But I will say this, and this is no slight, it is, organizing a conference is not a simple thing. It is a huge undertaking. But one of the things as Ifa people and people of Esuseeke that our ancestors continue to remind us of is time. Time. Being on time is critical. Being on time means that when we appoint our time with our ancestors and Risha, with the universe, they believe us. They believe that we will be on time. And so they come at that time. They are present at that time. And we are not. And whatever gifts, whatever ashe they were going to present us with at that time, we're not there to receive it. So it is, I know, I understand the challenges. I understand what this could mean. But I am from the old school. And I know what it is like to be on time. And so I will just share that with the gathering and for future endeavors. Really trying to be at the time, starting at the time that we appoint is critical. It is not just a matter of being punctual. There's an arrangement that we have made with the universe, and we need to keep that. It is also very important today, again, when I saw where the conference was going to be held at Despa's panel, I thought that was also significant. It is significant for several reasons, but for me and for my family, we grew up in the oil fields. We grew up in Point-au-Pierre. We grew up next door to Bertrand Kellman, tuning pan with big stone and fire, outside fire. That was our life. So being here in Despa's panel, not up the hill, okay, is like coming home in many ways, because a regular sound, especially in preparation for Carnival, was the pounding of that pan, not just across the road from where we were. Bertrand Kellman, noted and respected pan tuner. Now an elder, I believe he's still alive. Yes, yes. Good. So we grew up. I grew up hearing that. Missed that sound when we moved, hearing Birch tune pan. So being in Despa's panel is like coming home. Yeah? And my sister, you could attest to that. Okay. The Ifa Orisha Council, the IOCTT, listed 4 main goals in the preparation for this conference. The fourth of those goals identifies visibility and reputation as factors that are important to the Council's overall purpose. The suggestion is that the IOCTT is conscious of the global environment within which it exists and is therefore making ready to fully engage with that global environment. Consideration may be that the organization acknowledges its potential for expanding its reach within the wider Pan-African collective, understanding that the process of reclaiming our ancestral legacies is constitutional and that our traditional experience is holistic. Simply saying that we're not just spiritual people, that everything that we do as African people, everything that is connected to us, is not just being if it is a holistic experience. We cannot separate spirit from politics, from education, from health. It is all and one. So, what is this? What does this global environment, what are the frameworks that inform and enhance visibility? Because the organization is talking about enhancing visibility. What is the framework? What is some of the international frameworks that informs that? One, we are currently in the second decade for people of African descent. The second decade, 2025 to 2034. The second decade, the first decade, 2050 to 2024, has passed. Pushing for a second decade suggests that a lot of the work that could have been accomplished was not. And we know, some of us know that a lot of emphasis was placed on reparations. But there's so much more. There's so much more. Getting a decade in the first place required a considerable amount of convincing, not only the powers that be, but our own people. Our own people. Good? So now we are in the second decade. What is the relevance of that to the IOCTT? Is that we are following the tradition of our ancestors. We are people of African descent mainly, not totally, mainly. And anything that expresses or purports to project information or conditions for our existence is our business. The second item, the second item is the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization has recently created something called the Traditional Medicine Strategy, 2025 to 2034, which means that the World Health Organization has recognized the value of traditional medicine and moving to have it integrated with what we call modern medicine. The recognition of all those things that our grandparents and great-grandparents used to do, that is now recognized by the World Health Organization, the Traditional Medicine Strategy. Now, for IFA people, for Isheshe, there are a number of things that we do. You might even see it as medicine. We heal, we cleanse, we nourish, we use invocations, we use baths, we identify specific herbs. The Araba Osho attached to Ile Josie Oturomichi had written a paper in somewhere around 2006. He never had a chance to properly present it, where he deals with the tradition of herbal healing. And he speaks to how herbalists were taught in the first place. It's very interesting, and I think I have it still. It's a very interesting paper because in the beginning, he talks about the energies and spirits that guided herbalists, which herbs to pick, when to pick, how to pick. And in other words, he said in that paper that it didn't just come out of nowhere. We didn't just learn to boil herbs. There were energies that taught us how to do that. He also talked about why we have lost some contact with development and civilization. A lot of those energies are no longer visible or will appear to us in any particular way. But as IFA people, we have a lot of remedies, a lot of things that we do that we use for healing. So when I looked at this particular thing, I listened to some conversations recently around this, and a lot of people talking about, well, you know, why Africa can't do it? India has done it, China has done it. And I say, yeah, India has done it and China has done it. But they weren't challenged the way we were. They weren't wiped off the face of the earth the way we were. Our traditions weren't challenged the way we were. So that is another opportunity. The third thing is something called the Samoa Agreement. Now, I'll come back to this because it's not so much the agreement that is important in my discussion. It is something that happened around it. But I'll come back to it. But the Samoa Agreement is an agreement that was signed in Samoa in 2023 between the European Union and the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States. And that is also important because what it is that the European Union is asking the African, Caribbean, and Pacific states to adhere to certain policies that they have written down. At the time when the information came, there were 79 states that had already signed. I don't know if Trinidad and Tobago had, but there was a lot of debate around some of the items in the agreement. But the issue is not the agreement here today. The issue is what happened around it here in Trinidad, which concerned me considerably. And I think I made a little reference to it. I think I put something on WhatsApp or something like that. Okay. The fourth item is the exponential global growth of Esuseeke. Esuseeke is one of the fastest growing communities globally, all over the world. China and all, Babylon, all over. It is the fastest growing tradition, fastest growing community in the world. And I believe, is for the IOCTT to expand its reach within that community, within that international community. We have brothers and sisters in Cuba, we have brothers and sisters in Brazil, we have brothers and sisters in the United States. There's a Babalao I kind of follow on Facebook. He's all over the place. Every year, he's Nigerian, he's in Japan, but every year he goes to Brazil, and every year he goes to the United States. And he makes a tour, Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami, teaching IFA, initiating people. So the community is growing, and more and so in Brazil. And he posts all of his activities on Facebook, so you can follow him. One of the other things that he does that I like is every IFA day he casts his opera. He downloads it for the day. I look forward to that. I look forward to his Odu and what it says is brilliant. Anyway, so there is this huge Esuseeke community globally. We need to know each other. Baba talks about unity. We need to know each other. There are little differences here and there. There's the coloring of Trinidad and Tobago. There's the coloring of Brazil. There's the coloring of Cuba, but it is the same thing. Yeah? And we need to reach out. So that is just a little peek into what the kind of international or global environment that the ICTT currently exists within. But on the national level, visibility now speaks to something else. It talks about how the IOCTT sees itself really. What is its mission? How does it articulate that mission within the context of Trinidad and Tobago society? And for example, is there a program of action? Do we have a long-term plan, a 3-year plan, a 1-year plan? These are things that you can arrive at doing some simple organizational activities, strategic planning, situational analysis, and all that. Those things could help answer questions like that. In the case, though, of the IOCTT, in this geopolitics that is Trinidad and Tobago, in the midst of everything else that is going on, there are some systemic realities that we need to face. I will color or illustrate what I'm saying by some personal experiences. Can't help it because I've been around a long time, and a lot of things have impacted on how I see what I see. There are some systemic realities right here in Trinidad and Tobago that affect how we not only do what we do, but more so how we see ourselves. So, one example. Last year, now we're in May, and I must again be 2 days away from Africa Day, Africa Unity. So it's a critical time that we're doing this too. Last year, I think it was in June, when the IOCTT organized its IFA walk, IFA march in Port of Spain. Right. Now, some of what I'm going to say, the names of people have been redacted to prevent bacchanal, right? The IOCTT, I wasn't at the march, organized the march, and they were due to assemble at Botanical Gardens, am I correct? And walk down to Woodford Square. Permissions were sought to do certain things, and when IOCTT arrived at Botanical Gardens, they were told, we didn't know, nobody told us, or somebody called and said it wasn't happening again. No, that call could have come from outside, but it could also have come from inside. Good? In addition to that, just before that last year, I was asked to oversee the election of 4 officers of the IOCTT, which seemed to be a very simple process, only to hear later that again the potential for bacchanal. Somebody ain't happy with who get appointed and they didn't want it so and all of that. That is the reality. And it is not now that happening. It's been happening for a while. As I said, the enemy outside is one thing. We know that one. We can recognize it. The enemy within is a very, very, very deceptive creature. The other situation in our geopolity, and I'll try to speed up now, is a personal one. But it grated on me a little bit. And I mean no disrespect to our brothers and sisters of the Spiritual Baptist faith. I mean no disrespect. But when the Spiritual Baptists were given the day recognition, for some reason there seemed to be a little clouding of issues, a little grain of lines that Esuseeke and Spiritual Baptists is the same thing. Because at one point, I remember the preparation for it, and they were advertising it on radio, and they were playing Oriki. Ella was playing, and I'm saying, but no, they're Spiritual Baptists. Where are their hymns and songs? Why are they playing Oriki for Spiritual Baptists? Why? But I wondered whether it was carelessness, accidental, or deliberate, because I know there are times when things are done deliberately to cloud, to even help us, make us doubt ourselves. And my feeling is, it happened also with Emancipation Day. When Emancipation Day was first announced, suddenly it was the emancipation of all peoples. It wasn't about emancipation of our African ancestors. People had to kind of grind the foot in and dig down 10 toes to say, this is what Emancipation Day is about, not about emancipating all them people. If they emancipated, we're glad, but we talk about our people. And we always have to be doing this thing, always have to be watching carefully and making sure that we guide it back to where it is supposed to be. And so, IOCTT, the job is a big one. Okay, so these are some of the issues in my mind that challenge the idea of enhancing visibility within the national environment, but also within the international environment. Reputation, on the other hand, is a little more subjective, because good reputation, elevated reputation, is not something that is given, it is earned. And it is through that process of enhanced visibility that the elevated reputation will come. But again, when it comes to our geopolitics, there are some challenges. Now, the foundation of the IOCTT is IFA. And it is IFA that speaks functionally. And it is IFA that will speak to establishing the necessary standards. The IOCTT's reputation rests with the ability, or more so, with its readiness to monitor, to improve and upgrade, and to take decisive steps to correct or adjust activities and incidences that claim to be of IFA, but have no authority in IFA. And I would add that the IOCTT is challenged to work in collaboration with, rather than in opposition to, other groups that IFA or Risha, not separate, together. It is the only way to work. The very basis, I'll take us a little sideline, same thing, but because I talked about when IFA speaks. So here we go, when IFA speaks. The very basic understanding in Esuseeke is that when IFA speaks, we comply. In the literature, the IFA corpus, there are records of processes, of formula, of protocols for the beneficial interaction between us, human beings, and the Universal Supreme. Once these protocols are followed, positive outcome is assured. The case studies are clearly structured. When IFA divination is done and the Urdu has been downloaded, the diviner pronounces, IFA says. Then they proceed to roll out the instructions. But my observations have been quite interesting. What happens when IFA speaks and the diviner or the person in authority decides, well, they're going in another direction? They completely ignore the Odu and say something else. What happens when the diviner or the person in authority does things when they think nobody looking? Or when they think that the person sitting down opposite them don't know anything? Because I have watched it happen on several occasions. I was almost victim at one point. Or worse, when the holders, the title holders, the persons in authority, the diviners, determine that they will disregard IFA altogether because the answer does not suit them. The names have been redacted to prevent bacchanal, but I'll share this because it's really important. Some years ago, quite a few years ago, I attended a 2-day seminar. It had to do with interreligious studies, developing a curriculum for interreligious studies. On the first day, a certain person sat next to me, and we had a nice conversation, and we basically went through the day together, a person of high repute. On the second day, that person was late for the plenary, found me where I was sitting, and sat next to me and started to mumble, grumble. You see this thing? This so-called person, this person mustn't, no, that can't happen, that mustn't happen. And I turned to the person and I said, when we go to break, I want to have a quick word with you. That person avoided me for the rest of the day, for the rest of my life. Because what I was going to say is simply this. We did not choose that person. IFA did. And the most that we could do is to comply with what IFA has said. So these are some of the things, and I'm just using my own experiences to say to IOCTT, in the midst of everything, be aware, be conscious that this is what we're dealing with here. And we had to deal with it here first before we even spread our wings, because we can't go impaired. We have to repair and then go. So, the Samoa Agreement, I said I will come back to it quickly. What happened with that was, when it came out, there was some commentary around it. I don't know how much there was in Trinidad, except for one instance. Somebody sent me a clip. I cannot remember who it was on WhatsApp. There it was a religious leader, name redacted to prevent bacchanal, speaking from his pulpit on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. It bothered me because I wondered, a religious leader speaking on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, where are all the other religious leaders? And more importantly, nothing for Isheshe. Who speaks for us? Who says what? When something happens, I saw on Facebook a letter at some point in time, but by the time I saw it, I think the time had passed. My concern was, who speaks for us? When other people stand up and say, people in Trinidad and Tobago, do we accept that as it is? Do we accept it just like that? Because somebody of high repute says it? Or do we have concerns? And if we do, then how do we, not so much counter, but how do we speak for ourselves? What is the mechanism by which an organization like IOCTT could begin to be the voice of Isheshe in Trinidad and Tobago first, and possibly across the Caribbean? Yeah. And so, simply, visibility by expanding the globally within the wider Pan-African context, connecting with our brothers and sisters in the wider Isheshe diaspora, using organizational methods to boost the organizational potential, exploring and analyzing systemic realities, being proactive to manage those, standing against misuse and poaching of IFA processes and protocols. Because seeing people advertising on Facebook, we could teach to read and cast query, and it's costing so much possession. I don't know if these people have the authority to do that, but it's out there. And there are people who will buy into it. Do these people have the authority to do that? And finally, monitoring the national and global environments to produce a platform for the East Cheshire community in Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you very much.